session, and also would like to inform you that there will be a question and answer session. All of you can submit the question by scanning the QR code shown on the screen and clicking the question box. Thank you. Once again, we invite everyone to come inside the Nusantara Hall, take your seat as we'll begin our event shortly. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone. How was your lunch? Very good, I heard that. Thank you for the response. I see the motivation after lunch. Hopefully this will be an entertaining, yet we need to have a fruitful discussion as well throughout this afternoon. And would like to also say welcome back and welcome to all of you who've just arrived at the ISBSD this afternoon. So ladies and gentlemen, on the next session of the 47th IPA Convention and Exhibition, Enabling Oil and Gas Investment and Energy Transition for Energy Security, this afternoon we'll be talking about Emerging Industry Challenge. But before that, would like to also give you a little bit of a background on that. So the roles of carbon capture and storage, or CCS, and carbon capture usage and storage, or CCUS, in energy transition for Indonesia, reaching national determined contribution, will be wrapped up in the next video. Let's watch it together.
The roles of CCS-CCUS in energy transition for Indonesia reaching NDC. Minyak dan gas bumi masih memainkan peranan penting mewujudkan ketahanan energi. Di saat yang sama, Indonesia telah menetapkan target pengurangan emisi gas rumah kaca menuju net zero emission pada 2060 atau lebih cepat. Untuk mempertahankan produksi migas dan pemenuhan target pengurangan emisi, pemerintah mendorong pemanfaatan teknologi penangkapan, penyimpanan, dan pemanfaatan emisi karbon atau yang dikenal dengan Carbon Capture Storage (CCS) dan Carbon Capture Utilization and Storage (CCUS). Upaya ini sangat penting karena Indonesia mempunyai banyak lapangan migas yang memerlukan pengurangan emisi karbon. Hal itu sejalan dengan komitmen bersama untuk dekarbonisasi. CCS-CCUS juga dapat mengurangi emisi karbon di sektor-sektor luar migas, seperti sektor industri, kelistrikan, dan transportasi. Indonesia memiliki potensi penyimpanan karbon yang cukup besar. Menurut Ristart Energy, kapasitas penyimpanan mencapai 400 gigaton dan ExxonMobil memperkirakan 70-100 gigaton. Dengan kapasitas penyimpanan yang besar tersebut, CCS-CCUS dapat berperan untuk menurunkan emisi karbon di Indonesia maupun regional. Selain itu, CCS-CCUS juga dapat menjadi prasyarat untuk investasi di sektor ekstraktif dan memberikan manfaat ekonomi bagi pemerintah melalui mekanisme pasar karbon. Sebagai upaya nyata, pemerintah telah menerbitkan Peraturan Menteri ESDM Nomor 2 Tahun 2023 tentang penyelenggaraan penangkapan dan penyimpanan karbon, serta penangkapan, pemanfaatan, dan penyimpanan karbon pada kegiatan usaha hulu migas. Permen ini merupakan langkah awal untuk pengembangan CCS-CCUS di Indonesia yang perlu ditindaklanjuti dengan peraturan dan kebijakan lainnya, seperti pengusahaan CCS Hub di dalam maupun di luar wilayah kerja migas. Penerapan teknologi CCS memerlukan investasi besar, sebagaimana layaknya investasi di hulu migas. Oleh karena itu, keekonomian proyek CCS Hub harus menarik bagi investor global dengan menjamin iklim investasi dan kepastian peraturan. Sebagai industri pionir dan juga esensial, penerapan CCS Hub mengurangi emisi karbon dari industri migas maupun non-migas, memerlukan insentif seperti tax holiday agar dapat tumbuh berkembang dalam tahap awal. Selain itu, harga karbon di Indonesia yang terkoneksi dengan pasar internasional dapat menjadi daya tarik yang efektif untuk mendorong investasi CCS Hub dan pengembangan teknologi yang lebih cepat dan efisien. Untuk mendukung pengembangan ekosistem CCS-CCUS maupun CCS Hub, dibutuhkan kolaborasi seluruh pihak terkait, mulai dari penyusunan regulasi, keteknikan, keselamatan, dan pengurangan emisi.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we invite you to delve deeper into the transformative power of CCS and CCUS as we discuss its crucial role in driving Indonesia towards its NDC targets. Let us hear what it's like to dive into the game of this game-changing potential of CCS and CCUS in Indonesia's energy transformation journey or transition journey. Now, this session will focus on achieving sustainable energy by application of CCS and CCUS. So let's get into it. Now, we will have our presenter of the day that will also lead the discussion, Mr. Joshua Ngu. Now, let me just read a little bit of his bio. Mr. Joshua has extensive advisory experience in the energy sector across upstream, gasoline, downstream, petrochemicals, and low-carbon technologies. He is part of the Wood Mackenzie's consulting leadership team in Asia-Pacific and has led multiple complex engagements over the years. Examples, we have related engagements led by Mr. Joshua himself. And prior to joining Wood Mackenzie, Joshua was part of the corporate finance team at a global bank, advising clients on M&A and capital raising in the natural resources sector. Now, Joshua graduated from the University of Applied Science in Mannheim, Germany, with a master's degree in engineering management. Well, I guess it's time to hand over the stage to Mr. Joshua Ngu, so let's welcome him to the stage. Let's give a big round of applause, everyone.
A very good afternoon to all the ladies and gentlemen here in the room today. First of all, I'd like to thank IPA board and IPA for giving Wood Mackenzie the opportunity to work on this white paper. And as Andrew Howard, my colleague, has presented this morning, there are two parts to the white paper. The first part is really with regards to the need of developing the case for the need of further investment in oil and gas, and more importantly, further investment in low-carbon oil and gas in Indonesia. And the second part of the paper is what we are having a discussion on today and now, which is around CCS and CCUS investment in Indonesia. So before I start my presentation, I think it's important that we set the context right? I guess from Wood Mackenzie's perspective, and I'm definitely sure from IPA's perspective as well, we're not saying that CCS and CCUS is the only solution for decarbonization. We are a strong advocate for the development of renewables, and also we are a very strong advocate for the development of all kinds of decarbonization technologies that is being explored, including hydrogen, including EV vehicles, and all the different technologies out there. But from our perspective, there is a pressing need for decarbonization. There's a pressing need for us to explore all the different options available for decarbonization. And where CCES and CCUS come in is in the fact that it is one of the technologies that allow for the capture and storage of large-scale emissions. And I think there is a significant role for CCS and CCUS to play, not only in Indonesia, but also in the global context. So with that in mind, let's dig into a bit more of a discussion around CCS and CCUS. So first of all, I guess the fundamental question is, what is CCS, what is CCUS? And to a certain extent, it can be broken down into three parts. The first part is capture. And what we mean by capture is that there are large industrial processes, whether it's from power sector, whether it's from the upstream sector, whether it's from the steel sector or cement sector. I think across the board, when you think about all industrial processes that require energy, there will be carbon emissions. And those carbon emissions are captured in a CCS process, and they are transported either through pipelines. Increasingly, we're talking about transportation through shipping, and they are then either stored, which is why we call it CCS, carbon capture and storage, or it is then utilized, right? So carbon capture, utilization, and storage, which is CCUS. And where we are today is that the utilization part of of carbon which is captured, that's still relatively early in its technological stage. There are solutions out there, but it needs to be scaled up. And a lot more discussion is with regards to the storage of carbon that's been captured. And that is why today we are also talking quite a bit about CCS as a solution on top of CCUS. Again, I can't stress enough the importance that we try to look at all solutions to decarbonize, right? Let's leave no stone unturned, and that's kind of where we're coming from. Sorry, I think the slides. Well, the slides as formatting is a bit off, I guess, once sent over. But effectively, CCS, CCUS is a growing industry. It is growing significantly. So from Wood Mackenzie's perspective, we track every pipeline, every project out there from a capture and a storage perspective. And in general, we are looking at about 700 million tons of storage capacity that has been announced as project. Now, not all of them will come to fruition. Not all of them will be FID'd. But, we believe that there is a strong case for a huge part of that to be FID'd. And globally, by 2033, we are looking at about 400 million tons of storage capacity that, can come on stream over the next 10 years. Now, of course, with storage, you also need capture. And so when we track capture, we are seeing similar large amounts of capture capacity being announced, albeit a bit less than storage. And when we add it all together, when we put capture and storage together, 2033, we're looking at potentially a pipeline of 400 million tons coming to fruition and coming on stream. Now, these are large numbers compared to where we are today. We are about 40 million tons today, and a lot of it is still in EOR, EGR. But, it is a huge investment potential, not only, again, for the world, but also for Indonesia as well. And this is why we are having this very important discussion today. Now, there is a lot of discussion around, wait a second, CCS, CCUS is primarily for the upstream industry only, right? It's to capture CO2 from the production of oil and gas. Well, is that really the case, right? And this is a chart in which we would like to show to everyone in the fact that carbon capture and storage is not necessarily only for the upstream sector. It is an important part of the upstream sector for the decarbonization of oil and gas production, but it is also a very important technology for the decarbonization of the non-upstream sectors or the wider industry. So here, we have examples of capture in smelting. We have got examples of capture in cement plants. We've got example of captures in steel plants. And when we look at kind of the stack bar across on the right side of the chart, each color that you see there is a project that is looking at the capture of the different type of industries. So each color here represents a different industry. The light blue at the bottom is hydrogen, and if you work your way up, based on the project that's been announced, you effectively have projects, CCS projects in close to all sectors. Power, steel, smelting, methanol plants, and I think that really shows kind of what CCS, CCUS is. Again, it is not only about the decarbonization of oil and gas. More importantly, it is about supporting the decarbonization of industries in general. So, what does Indonesia bring to the table? Why are we talking about CCS in Indonesia? And when we think about what Indonesia has significant storage capacity. When we talk about storage of CCS, storage of carbon, sorry, there are two main areas in which you would store carbon. First is in depleted oil and gas fields. And of course, Indonesia has a long-standing oil and gas industry. There is existing fields that are currently producing or even depleted that can be used as storage for carbon. But also at the same time, we are seeing the emergence of saline aquifers as a storage potential as well. If we think about it from a storage potential perspective, we are seeing Indonesia as one of the largest, we're seeing Indonesia having one of the largest storage potential in the Southeast Asia region. And I think that is really, really exciting for Indonesia. And these are resources and these are assets that Indonesia has that it can hopefully monetize, not only to deliver revenue for the government, but also to allow the decarbonization of the world. Again, can't stress enough the importance of it. What else does Indonesia have, right? If we think about the parallels of the oil and gas industry and the CCS industry, there is a lot of similarities. One of them is the fact that you need to be drilling wells. Historically, in oil and gas, you are drilling wells to produce hydrocarbons. Going forward, if you're looking at CCS, you are drilling wells to store. So again, instead of extracting, you're injecting. Also, at the same time, there is a lot of knowledge in subsurface understanding in Indonesia. There's a lot of workforce that really understands subsurface and geology. And I think that's also an asset that Indonesia has to really excel and propel the country into having a CCS industry as well. So when we think through all of the different ingredients that Indonesia has to provide storage services, not only for domestic but international, the argument is really compelling. Again, there is a lot of investment so far in oil and gas. There's a lot of infrastructure that can be repurposed for the development of CCS. And again, it's really, really exciting to see the opportunity here to really create a new industry for Indonesia. It is something that other countries are pursuing. We have heard and we have discussed with different stakeholders and in Indonesia. And the general consensus is that the industry is something in which Indonesia should really, really look into and really, really develop. And again, as part of Mackenzie, really excited to see that progressing. So the question is, what is the value of CCS and CCUS development in Indonesia. So I think first of all, it's really kind of the international emissions capture, right? So Indonesia, with its storage asset, really allows or really has the opportunity here for international emissions or international emitter who do not have storage capacity, and they can store with Indonesia. Countries such as Singapore, countries such as Japan, Korea, right? They all can and they are looking for storage opportunities, and I think Indonesia can provide a service. You can generate tax revenues out of it, and that's really exciting. At the same time, Indonesia can also capture its own domestic emissions. Indonesia has a net zero target, 2060, and really this is another opportunity for Indonesia to decarbonize its industry. And most excitingly, we have the new economic sector. What we are thinking about is not CCS as just oil and gas. It is a new industry in itself. It's going to create jobs, it's going to create revenues, and it is kind of the potential future industry similar to oil and gas, similar to mining. It is a new industry in itself. And I think this is where we need to have that ambition and that thinking rather than really constrain that into just oil and gas. And I think, again, when we're having the discussion with all the different panelists, we can explore that a bit further in terms of what it means for Indonesia. So where are we today? I think Indonesia has achieved a lot over the last year. Start with the regulations number 2, 2023, right, which really allows the capture and storage of CO2 in petroleum producing areas. But when you expand that and you think about what does Indonesia want to achieve, what do we want Indonesia CCS industry to be, it is really something in which we can try to maximize. And what I mean by that is we would want to see a development of a new industry where we allow the capture and storage of emissions, not only from upstream oil and gas, but also from the other sectors in the industry, both domestically and internationally from a source perspective, but from a storage perspective as well. We really want to allow the storage of CO2 not only in petroleum producing areas, but also in new licenses, in standalone storage licenses, which if you look at kind of what's been done in other parts of the world, and please do stay on for the second part of our discussion today. We will have examples of what that looks like in different parts of the world, whether it's in the US or in the UK, where the countries have actively awarded storage licenses, standalone storage licenses for the capture and storage of CO2. And I think that's where the future of the industry is. And that's how far and how wide we should be thinking about carbon capture and storage in Indonesia. So what else do we need when we're talking about a new industry, right? I've talked a bit about the storage capacity that Indonesia has. What you also need is the sources, and I've talked a bit about that. There is significant domestic emissions that can be captured. There is a lot of potential for international CO2 emissions to be imported and stored. But that's not it, right? And if we look through the slide here, a huge part of it is the third one in green, which is policy and regulations. We need to develop a legal framework to allow the carbon capture and storage industry to thrive. We need some sort of rule to govern the industry, similar to any other industry that we're seeing in Indonesia. Again, an example of oil and gas or whatnot. We need the regulations to understand the rules of the game, but more importantly, we need the rules to safeguard Indonesia's safeguard Indonesia's interests, to make sure that Indonesia's interests are well protected. On top of that, we have competitive investments. And when we talk about that, when we're talking about competitive investments, it's really about attracting investments into Indonesia. In Malaysia is also looking at similar opportunities. Australia is really pushing for carbon capture and storage and even importation of CO2 for storage. And I think that's where the competitive investment needs to come in. You can't just say, right, we don't care about what other countries are doing, we're going to impose a huge tax on capture or a huge fiscal term on capture and storage and then hope that it goes away. It is, again, a global business, and it's something in which we need to be conscious about. We need to be competitive against other countries. Last but not least, it's about industry readiness. And I think this is where Indonesia fares very well. I've talked earlier about the fact that Indonesia has a large workforce that understands the subsurface and the geology of Indonesia. There's a lot of experience in Indonesia when it comes to industrial processes, managing gas or handling gases. So again, industry needs to be ready. Workforce is one of them, but also the ecosystem. We're talking about supply chains, we're talking about suppliers, we're talking about ready and available technologies that is accessible for the development of the industry. And when we put all of that together, you know, we really have a winning formula, I would have to say, to compete and to have a thriving CCS industry. So when we put together the white paper, we started thinking together around, again, with all the consultations, with all the different bodies, we start thinking about what is the next step, what do we tangibly require, because it's very easy for Mackenzie to say this is all that needs to be put together, it's all of this important, but you know, what are the tangible next steps? And you know, when we think through it, there are kind of 5 key areas in which we are seeing the need for development. So first of all is to have the CCS regulations. Again, I can't stress enough the importance of it. You need to legalize the activity of CCS, not only in petroleum operating areas, but also in areas in which they are not producing oil and gas, so standalone licenses, as we mentioned. So that's part 1. And then in terms of part 2 is CO2 cross-border arrangements. Again, this requires a bit of G2G, and I think Indonesia is working extremely hard, engaging with the different, I would say, other kind of counterparts, whether it's G20 or with other countries as well, to kind of develop that relationship and develop the rules in terms of how do you account for the carbon reduction or the carbon abated, for example. And I think that's really important. Or what are the rules or the liabilities that each country would have when it comes to some of the operational issues that you might have. Again, I think, and also it is also important to say that the G2G negotiations and the agreements really sets the context for commercial B2B businesses to come in to play in this space, right? So that's number 2. So number 3, we've got a national carbon trading framework. Again, that's been discussed in Indonesia. What this really allows is for Indonesia to help get capital into the development of CCS. It's not a minimum requirement, but you know, through carbon credit, you can get different sources of capital coming in to provide investments to what CCS is in terms of significant capital investment that's required. In terms of 4, we're talking about CCS incentives. Where we're coming from is to a certain extent, lessons learned from other countries, and more importantly, lessons learned from other industries as well. CCS is a relatively new industry. We still have a lot of lessons learned that we need to develop, whether it's from operational perspective, whether it's from reducing cost perspective, and what a lot of other countries are doing, for example, in the US or in the UK, they are providing subsidies to at least support the first tranche of projects coming in, right? So that we can learn and get better and reduce the cost for CCS. And it's not only about the cost, but it's about HSE, the safety around it, and also the best practices around developing and operating CCS projects. And if you draw the parallels of I would say, emerging technologies, I would always like to draw reference to, let's say, the renewables industry, solar industry, for example, right? 10, 15 years ago, everyone was saying renewables expensive, right? And governments have decided that this is an important technology that we need to be investing in, providing feed-in tariffs, subsidies, and eventually the cost of solar today, for example, has come down significantly to a point in which you do not necessarily need subsidies anymore, right? And if we have that same mindset around supporting new industries, and this is not unique to CCS, this is kind of in general applies to all new emerging technologies, you know, that will really spur and boost the development and also the lessons learned from that. There was a huge learning curve, but we are confident that we can get there with more investments, pilot projects, and more importantly, commercial projects as well. Last but not least is carbon price, right? And it is a sensitive topic, to be frank. With a view with carbon price being introduced, there is a perception, and which is true, that it will impact energy cost, right? And this is why this is number 5. If Indonesia, for example, does not want to introduce domestic carbon taxes, some of the domestic, there is little incentive for industries to capture their CO2 and to store. And while Indonesia gets ready, we can also look at international players who already have carbon taxes that are willing to pay, and let's start from there first. But more importantly, there is a initiative, I guess, which is called the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, in which if products are being sold to EU, they will be taxed based on their carbon content. And so that may impose or have impact on the industry in itself, where, let's for example, a steel plant producing steel in Indonesia exporting to EU, they will be taxed anyways in EU. So my question is, why don't tax it here in Indonesia, right? So again, from a policy perspective, it needs to be thought out. Of course, we do not necessarily want to impact the livelihoods of the people in a huge way, but I think from a policy perspective, we can get extremely smart in terms of finding solutions to make sure, again, that the interests of the people are protected, but more importantly, the interests of Indonesia is protected as well. And so this is my last slide before going to a discussion. And this is a slide where we try to put together a timeline for all of these initiatives to be kind of considered and to be implemented as well. I think my colleague Andy mentioned earlier that it is an aggressive timeline, even from a upstream investment oil and gas perspective, but we have to try, right? Because time is of the essence here. First and foremost, I think regulatory framework is important, and I know Indonesia government is trying really hard to put that together. So, fingers crossed that gets across the line with at least one of that being ticked off the box. And then, of course, all the others will come into play. And realistically, we are thinking about a potential for it to be operational in 1.5 years. We're not saying that definitely the projects will be there in 1.5 years, but at least the key ingredients to allow a thriving CCS industry is being put together and is ready over the next 1.5 years. And the fundamental question is, why so fast, right? It's 1.5 years, decarbonization target is 2060. We've got quite a long way to go, right? That can wait another 5 years. But I think the two important things is, one, Indonesia is competing, right? If other countries get ahead and they have first mover advantage, Indonesia is lagging behind. And I think that's a huge part of it. One huge reason in which why Indonesia should act fast, should it want to have a thriving CCS industry as fast as possible. The second is that CCS investments do not happen overnight. There is a development time frame that you're looking at, 6 years, 7 years that you're looking at. You have to design the project, you have to start EPC, you have to drill wells. So there is a time frame in which there's a lead time, I would say, from FID or even project development all the way through to first injection. And realizing that is important, because if it's a 6-year lead time, 7-year lead time, today we're in 2023, we're talking about a 2030 time frame in which you potentially have first injection. Ibu Kathy might said it might happen a lot faster, so we can talk about that. But there's no harm in putting that a bit faster. There's no waiting for decarbonization. And so that's kind of my last comment. And let's have a good discussion on the white paper. And of course, I would like to invite the panelists to come on stage to provide their response, but more importantly, let's have a light-hearted discussion on a very serious topic. I'm not sure if that works, but let's give it a try. So, first of all, may I please invite Professor Tutuka Ariadji to join us on stage. He's the Director General of Oil and Gas Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources. Pak Tutuka does not need further introduction. Welcome, Pak. Next, we have Bapak Nanang Abdul Manaf, Vice Chairman of SKK Migas. Thanks for joining us, Pak. Next, we have Ibu Dr. Belladonna Troxylon Maulianda. She's the Executive Director of Indonesia CCUS Center. And last but not least, we have Ibu Kathy Wu, Senior Vice President, BP Gas and Low Carbon Energy of APAC, and also IPA board member. So she holds 2 hats today. Hopefully my presentation was not too long. And thanks a lot for joining the panel. And kind of before we start with discussions, maybe we'll have kind of early responses to the white paper, and kind of for you to share your thoughts on it. So maybe Pak Tutuka, maybe we can start with you first in terms of kind of your views.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much as well. My impression of this, it was very helpful for us to frame our further steps and to confirm that we are doing is on the right track. So thanks a lot for that. So we, have confidence in doing what I'm doing right now, what we are doing right now, and we will further to move ahead, and even to make it faster than what we are planning right now. So again, thank you very much. Give us a fruitful direction, knowledge to us. Thanks.
Thank you, Pak. And next, of course, Bapak Nanang, do you have any thoughts? I understand you have a few slides. Happy for you to come on the podium and provide your views as well in terms of SKK Migas' role. Round of applause for Pak Nanang.
Thank you, Joshua. I think this is the very great opportunity for the SKK Migas to socialize our response regarding the white paper arranged by the collaboration between the WoodMac and then IPA. So several issues should be addressed by the SKK Migas. So I think I would like to maximize the opportunity in this stage. Let me share, technical problem. Okay, apologize. Let me share the several slides we already prepared regarding our response for the white paper already arranged by the WoodMac. Yeah. So SKK Migas have the Low Carbonate Initiative program in upstream oil and gas activities in Indonesia. And regarding the CCS and CCUS, so number 3, prior to carbon storage capacity in oil and gas sector, CCS, CCUS plays important role in decreasing of the carbon release. So this is one of our initiative in SKK Migas to contribute our NDC that our government already declared and committed to achieve the net zero emission 2060 or the earlier. SKK Migas also already arranged the several guidelines to implement the CCS and CCUS policy, of course, refer to the new regulation. So the guideline will provide detailed and comprehensive governance on deploy CCS and CCUS in the contracted oil and gas block in Indonesia. Comprising the priority is to increase production, of course, and we have the evidence in Ibu Katie area, So we already approved the P.O.D. for the implementing the CCUS in Ubadari field. So this is one of our good evidence will increase the gas production in Tangguh area. And secondly, align with the other regulations, such as the carbon trading, MRT, monitoring, reporting, and then verification, and so on. And then business concept between the PAC and other parties, and detailed guideline on technical aspect. Scope of the SKK Migas guideline on the CCUS, comprising the technical and the HSE, such as the potential resources, technical and operating procedure, HSE, and then approval. And then, of course, we address the project economic as well, financial investment decision procedure, lease or maybe purchase scenario, in-house or third-party operation, and then approval. Regarding the commercial, comprising the carbon monetization and then carbon storage, and of course the accounting comprise the operating cost sharing, equity sharing, accounting procedure, and then cost structure as well. And aspect management, facility sharing procedure, third-party operation, asset management procedure, and approval. And of course, we address the legal aspect as well, regarding the PAC contract, legal issues, and so on. Here is the potential for the carbon storage in our basin in Indonesia, and I guess the several previous presenters already addressed this issue. So we have the very big potential to store the CO2, depleted and oil gas around the 2.5 billion ton CO2, and then saline aquifer, especially in Northwest Java Basin, we have around 9.7 billion ton CO2. So this is the big opportunity for Indonesia to play our role. And the last, this is our program for the next future. We have around 5 CCS and CCUS project in Indonesia are still in the study and preparation state, but most are targeted before the 2030. So hopefully this is a very big homework for us, but we still have the optimistic to deliver our target. I think that's all from the SKK Migas to respond the white paper raised by the WoodMac and then IPA. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pak Nanang. And we will have a bit more of a discussion about what you mentioned earlier after all presenters have presented. So maybe next we can have Ibu Belladonna to share her thoughts in terms of the development of CCS in Indonesia.
Okay. So good afternoon all. Thank you, Josh, for the great presentation, and thank you for the IPA committee that already invited me. Thank you for coming to the IPA session of the Emerging Industry Challenge, CCS and CCUS, in energy transition for Indonesia reaching net zero emission. So yeah, first of all, let me introduce you myself. I'm Belladonna Maulianda. You can call me Bella. Let me introduce you that, I'm old. I'm not that young anymore. I'm 40 years old. I have 4 kids because, back then in Malaysia when I was an assistant professor, the students used to think that I was younger than them. So rest assured, I'm old. So I'm the executive director of Indonesia CCS Center, and I'm also the special advisor for the coordinating Minister of Maritime and Investment. I have around 20 years working experience. As I mentioned, I'm not young. And then I'm helping the coordinating minister to develop the CCS presidential regulation right now, working together with the MEMR. And I was also helping the MEMR to develop the oil and gas CCS and CCS regulation that was launched in 2023. I have worked for the multinational company, national company, consulting, institution, and also government. So I did my bachelor in University of Indonesia in gas metalchemical engineering, and I did my Ph.D. in University of Calgary in Canada. I also have a professional license from Canada, and currently I'm pursuing my MBA at UTP. Okay, so that's about me. Next one, I have 3 sections on my slides. Basically, the first one is the importance of the topics, which is the context setting. And then the second outline is what is the importance of interministerial collaboration and policy advocacy to driving force Indonesia as the CCS hub. And then the last one is what is the benefit of pushing forward Indonesia as the CCS hub for the government and also for the Indonesian public. So just to give you a brief context, basically globally, all the countries have put aside a commitment to reach the net zero emission. And then you can see there are around 68 countries that is producing 88% of the global emission that, they have launched and committed to the net zero emission. So you can see the dark blue countries are the one that already put CCS as their legislation, and also on the light blue are the countries that put the net zero emission as their target. And then on the gray countries are the countries that haven't put any statement or goal in the net zero emission. So you can see, we're working together globally, and then there are a certain framework that certain countries following, but in a brief summary nutshell, there are around 9 steps that we can follow that is divided into 3 main categories. So the first one is the physical building blocks, such as the infrastructure, the supply chain, the innovation and research and technology. And then the second one is the enablers, such as the government, the regulation, the standards, the collaboration, and so on. And then the third one is the economic and social adjustment. So you can see, based on Joshua's presentation, this is in a summary, in a nutshell, what we can do together globally to reach the net zero emission. Okay, so the second topic is on the interministerial collaboration that, you can see there's a lot of homework that was set by Nanang earlier that you can see globally we have done that homework already, right? So on the top left corner that you can see in EU, European Union, they've done many work in a high level, such as in 2022, they've done a very high level workshop in enabling cross-border CCS with the participants from different stakeholders such as the ministries, the funding institution, the EFTA, IMO, and so on, right? So you can see we need to have many stakeholders collaboration to make things happen even in the EU, right? So in the top middle, you can see in UK in 2020, UK government published the 10-point plan for the green industrial revolution. That you can see that without the government intervention that they cannot do a final investment decision for the private firms, where the oil and gas invest in 3 billion pounds sterling in the transportation and storage infrastructure by 2030. And you can see on the top right from US, from the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, that 5 US government agencies account for the 96% of the IRA funding. So you can see even in the US, it took around 5 agencies of the government to, sit together and put aside their funding to make things happen. And then on the bottom left, you can see from Malaysia, recently in 2023, they launched the incentive for CCS to make industries to implement CCS easier, right? And on the bottom right in Japan, in 2021, the cabinet launched 6 strategic energy plan where METI support the government by launching the CCS roadmap for their long term, that they're gonna store the CO2 up to 240 million tons up to 2050. And where we are in Indonesia, you can see in the bottom middle that, since early in 2023, MEMR already launched the CCS and CCUS in oil and gas working area regulation. And then since early 2023, the coordinating minister of maritime and investment facilitated multi-ministries, including MER, to develop the presidential regulation in CCS cross-border. So rest assured, we are working our hard to make things work. And then as the center, Indonesia CCS Center that was launched in March this year, we are facilitating CCS discussion among the stakeholders. So this is my last slide. Basically, these are some of the expected benefits for the government resulting from development of CCS hub in Indonesia. You can see that when Indonesia becoming the regional CCS hub, it can bring 3 main benefits. The first one is storage at scale. As mentioned before, Indonesia has a storage capacity up to 400 gigatons, which is onshore and offshore. So we have that benefits. And then the second one, we have the regional demand. And as you know, we have other countries, neighboring countries that has a very high carbon tax, such as Singapore. This year they have $4 per ton, and then next year will be $25 per ton, and then in the next 2 years they will be having $45 per ton. So this is the potential market that we have to tap into. And then the third one, when we have the CCS hub infrastructure already put in place, we can have this as a long-term investment for our future low-carbon energy business, such as hydrogen, green and blue ammonia, and green and blue methanol. Okay, I was joking, I have another slide, so because this is IPA, I want to share a bit of technical. So there are 4 papers that I think is very important for CCS, especially in subsurface. So paper number 1 and number 3 and number 4 are from DOE in terms of dynamic injection limits, and CCS monitoring. And you can see paper number 2 is from my PhD thesis. I derive a new equation on the permeability and porosity as a function of pressure to determine the CCS storage capacity dynamically. So yeah, that's all. Thank you from me. If you have any other concern and you want to connect with ICCS Center, you can connect us on our LinkedIn and our website. And we have a coming CCS Forum in September as one of the side event of Asian Summit. Looking forward to see you all there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibu Belladonna. And thanks for sharing what the government is doing. And I think last but not least, we have Ibu Kathy Wu to kind of having her share her thoughts on, I think one of the key things that we are talking about CCS, CCUS, right? Which one's more important, which one should be prioritized, and what needs to happen next. So Ibu Kathy, please.
So distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, selamat siang. My name is Kathy Wu. I'm the regional president of APAC of BP's Gas and Low Carbon Business Group. In this opportunity, I'm acting as IPA board member to discuss the priorities of CCS or CCUS, which comes first, emission reduction or petroleum production. So it's a good question. And I think the answer is both. Whether it's CCS or CCUS, both aim at CO2 emission reductions. Both are fundamental in enabling gas as a long-term transitions energy. and both are crucial in underpinning a pathway to energy transition and achieving the emission reduction targets. As we all have heard, CCS involving capture CO2 emissions from petroleum operations, industrial sectors, storing them deep underground in geological formations to prevent the CO2 from being released into the atmosphere. It is primarily focused on mitigating emissions and reducing our carbon footprint. CCUS includes the same carbon capture process, but it goes one step further by utilizing the captured CO2 for a variety of beneficial purposes, such as enhanced oil recovery and enhanced gas recovery. After the utilization, the remaining CO2 is still stored underground. So CCUS not only helps reduce emissions, but also deliver additional benefits, such as, in this case, increase in petroleum production. So the white paper that IPA has developed with the support of WoodMac emphasizes the urgency of mitigating climate change and achieving net zero emissions. Gas will serve as a bridge fuel during the energy transition, and CCS/CCUS is recognized as a key tool for decarbonization, particularly in hard-to-abate sectors, such as heavy industry, aviation, shipping. Both CCS and CCUS hold immense values in combating climate change. We believe an integrated approach which brings synergies via CCS or CCUS will be highly impactful, and it also enables our sector to remain competitive for the long term. And better yet, CCS and CCUS is seen as a readily available and operational decarbonization solution. So it is very, very well positioned, and it must play a key role in reducing our carbon footprint. To support Indonesia's commitment in achieving net zero by 2060 or earlier, there is increasing focus on decarbonization, and the CCS/CCUS plays a very key role into that. Okay, there's a bit of animation. Okay. So what does it take to build a successful CCS and CCUS industry? From our point of view, it's 4 key elements. First is supply of CO2 storage space. On the supply side, in Indonesia, we do have the advantage of our vast natural storage capacity from depleted reservoirs, hydrocarbon reservoirs, when the oil and gas are fully depleted, extracted, lots of capacity, and also saline aquifers. This makes Indonesia very well positioned in capturing the value and being a leader in the region. Second is demand. We know there is growing interest in CO2 storage, especially from countries in the region where such natural storage capacity does not exist, and there's untapped potential. Technology and infrastructure to achieve success is vital to have a fully functional value chain. And most pressingly, we need to support the government. The industry needs to support the government in building a robust regulatory framework and associated policies, like what Pak Tutuka, Pak Nanang, and Ibu Bella has just mentioned. So in summary, we have a unique opportunity to make a significant contribution. Let's work together in making it happen. Now let me share with you just a bit about the BP-operated Tangguh CCUS project, which Pak Menteri and Pak Nanang just mentioned. So currently, the Tangguh CCUS project stands as the most advanced CCS project in Indonesia, and we aim to build it as the country's first CCS hub. We are in a stage of define, front-end engineering and design, and we aim to bring the project to FID in the very near future. For the initial phase, we plan to inject more than 30 million tons of CO2 back into the reservoir, and this CO2 will help us increase gas production by about 400 BCF. That's incremental. Not only that, Tangguh has the potential of maximum CO2 capacity of up to 1.8 gigatons, both from the gas reservoirs and from the saline aquifer. This provides a tremendous opportunity for Tangguh to be a CCS hub by doing CO2 injection, storage, and to third party. It will generate additional state revenue as well as creating new employment. So through this project, BP and Tangguh partnership will do our best to do both of reducing hydrocarbon, reducing CO2 footprint and increasing production. With our long-standing history in Indonesia, our upstream capabilities, our decades of relationships with our customers, and many of them are coming from the emission-heavy, storage-short countries, BP is very committed in supporting the government of Indonesia to build a new and successful CCS, CCUS industry. So, terima kasih banyak.
Thank you, Ibu Kathy. Thank you. Again, thanks for sharing your thoughts on the paper, and of course, more importantly, sharing your thoughts on CCS development in Indonesia. And of course, I think it's always good to have a bit of a discussion about kind of where we are today. And I think to start the discussion, let's start off with a very fundamental and basic question around the fact that, does any of the panelists or of you think that you can, or do you see a world where CCS or CCUS is not a technology that supports the decarbonization of the world? Or more importantly, if I rephrase it in a different way, would you see a decarbonized world without CCS as a solution? So maybe for Pak Tutuka.
Well, I think this in the world, I think it is impossible not to have CCS, CCUS for this solution. But one thing that we have to fully understand is that CCS, carbon capture storage in the aquifer, is not easy. Not many examples in the world, successful examples in the world, implementation of this CCS. CCUS is quite different. CCUS is much easier. So, what actually the basis, the background of this condition? Because getting water dissolved, getting gas dissolved into water, it's much difficult, much harder. So we have to really understand and in this technology, and because this is the key of the CCS, whether it succeed or not. So if I may suggest, let's start with CCUS, if there is a possibility to do that. Then some sort of research and development in CCS. So as a government side, we will support that. Because we are not right now, we are not aiming the successful CCS in this early stage. So we will see all of you from the oil companies doing this with, some sort of, what I say, it's research, applied research, something like that for CCS. Because, again, I do understand that CCS is not easy. Thank you.
Thanks, Pak Tutuka. Maybe any other comments? Maybe Pak Nanang? Or?
Yes, thank you, Joshua. Even this technology, this method is a new thing in Indonesia. Even in global, yeah. Not many countries already implemented the CCS and CCUS. But I still remember when I involved with, for the first time, study for the CCS in the Gundi area. When I worked in the Pertamina IPA, one of the gas field located in the Central Java, and we started 2011. Yeah, so yeah, more than one years we started with the study from the G&LCE study, reservoir study, production, and then facilities, especially because dealing with the CO2. Yeah, So I think from our learning curve, yeah, we have confidence to implement the CCS and CCUS. And we still, I cannot wait the success story from the BP to implement the CCUS, yeah. And especially we can increase the gas production at, in that area around the 400 BCF. Is very, very matter for us. Thank you.
And I guess just to kind of comment as well, I guess, you know, from a kind of a CCS or storage in saline aquifers, I think, you know, there are various projects in the world out there that are actually injecting and are also looking to inject more in saline aquifers. And definitely, I think that's where kind of maybe Ibu Belladonna comes in terms of kind of the lessons learned, right? From G2G, but also from B2B as well. Kind of, do you agree, Ibu Belladonna?
Yeah, thank you, Josh, for the question. It was a good question, right? So just to referring to Pak Tutuka and Pak Nanang mentioned that it was hard to implement and develop CCS. I think on the other side, I have to give more optimistic aspiration, right? Because when I did my PhD, it was related to CCS, and I also work towards few of the CCS projects in Canada and Malaysia. So basically, in the CCS, I totally agree with Pak Tutuka that we have to understand the trapping mechanism of CO2. So basically, you know, there are three trapping mechanisms of CO2, either absorb on the surface of the rock, or dissolve in the saline aquifer, or, you know, dissolve in the matrix itself. So it's a complex matter, then I agree we have to work together. So going back to Joshua's question on the G2G and B2B, I think we have to see the urgency on the short term and long term. If we want to make it happen fast, I think we have to do it B2B first, right? Such as from the other countries, we know there is a cross-border between US and Canada, but this is for CCUS, from Dakota to Canada, and also from Denmark and Belgium, and then UK and Norway, and other examples, right? So I think looking at the examples, to make it fast, we have to do it B2B first. But of course, it has to be supported by the government, right? So I totally agree with your paper that you were saying we have to have a cross-border agreement between Indonesia and other countries, which is the potential energy consumer industries. So I don't want to call them emitters, but I want to call them the energy consumer industries, right? Yep. So, you know, we have to make the B2B first, but it has to be supported by the government. But because if we mimic from the Norway, right, for example, Norway has a funding mechanism that is totally different, which is it's 62% from the government funding, and then 17% from carbon credit, and then the rest is private investment. But I think here in Indonesia, as the emerging countries, we have to work from the other way around, right? We have to attract the foreign investors first, then you know, working towards to that infrastructure development first. Yeah.
Thank you. And I'm probably putting Ibu Kathy on the spot here, but I'm assuming in your capacity as IPA board member, also as a representative of BP, I'm sure from a corporate perspective, there's a lot of knowledge and technology sharing that you'll be kind of happy to kind of share with the different kind of governments and different entities and institutes as well.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So I agree with the panelists. I think B2P is a good place to start, but government support is critical. And to take our existing gas, LNG industry as an example, we have long-term customers. We have developed more than 10 years from Japan, from South Korea, from China. And they're in need of LNG, and there are also countries where they have limited storage capacity. So as we talk about cross-border agreements, and the B2B is in terms of shaping a potential deal is there, but government to government and private, public-private collaboration is really key. And I think Indonesia is very uniquely advantaged in making that happen.
And maybe staying with you, Ibu Kathy, as well, I think Ibu Belladonna talked about urgency. In my presentation, we talked about urgency of CCS and CCUS as well. Kind of, what are your thoughts around kind of urgency? Like, why is it important that we move as fast as possible?
Yeah. So the answer is yes. And I think we stand in this time of huge opportunity. I think we should get after it. And we have the responsibility, each country has the NDC to figure out how human global community can work together to combat climate change. And Indonesia government has pledged net zero by 2060 or earlier. So government, public, private sectors should work together. It's a great opportunity from the standpoint of additional state revenue, additional employment opportunities, and beyond just combating climate change. So in terms of promoting economic development, our human growth, and making sure our energy transition is affordable, just, secure, and a huge opportunity.
Any thoughts on that, Bella?
Hello. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Josh. So basically, I just want to stand out 2 points, right? One thing, the first one is, right now CCS is acting like a license to invest, right? Just to give you an example, you know, there are many foreign investors that they don't want to invest in Indonesia if they cannot do CCS. It's like a period, like they don't even think twice that, you know, they have to do it, the CCS. Why? Because they don't want to add their global emission portfolio, right? So that's one thing that I want to emphasize. And then the second thing is, you know, the good thing of having an Indonesia CCS Center, we're working and talking with many stakeholders. And one of them is, to give you an example, is the SOE. There's one SOE in Indonesia that they want to CCS their business by 1/6. So around 16% of their business has to be CCS'd in 2030. Why? Because there's a demand from their customer in Japan for the blue ammonia, right? So then there are many questions about how to make CCS to be profitable, right? So like to give you this example, this SOE, they give it to their customer, right? So they're calculating the OPEX and CAPEX, and it turns out around, you know, between $10 to $20 per ton, but then they charge it to their customer, which their customer, they're okay with that because they want to have a premium product, right, which is blue product that has to be CCS, right? So then this is one of the things that we have to put in our mind, that CCS can be profitable already when, you know, when you're calculating from end to end, from upstream to downstream, and then work together with your customer. Yeah.
And maybe to add to that as well, the referencing the white paper, I think there was a point made in terms of the fact that, you know, latching on top of your point, you know, industries, be it steel or any other kind of energy-intensive industries, all these companies do have their net zero targets themselves. And so when they are looking for investments in their next steel plant, they're looking at investments in the next cement plant, or even a petrochemical plant, right? What they want is, one, for their power that they procure to be as clean as possible, but also at the same time for them to be able to decarbonize their own operations. And I guess from that perspective, it's also encouraging foreign direct investments in kind of the general industry and not only in oil and gas. And I think that's one of the very important points. And so if you're thinking out loud here and say, right, you know, if a car manufacturer, Tesla, wants to build a new plant, right, and country A has you know, low carbon electricity and has carbon capture opportunities compared to country B, which does not have, then, you know, more often than not, the decision here is to invest in country A. And I guess when we think about where Indonesia wants to go in terms of attracting investments, but more importantly, where Indonesia wants to go in terms of you know, providing you know, its services as a key manufacturing hub for the region and even the world, you know, that can be a competitive advantage for Indonesia as well. So yeah. yeah, please do read the white paper. We've got quite a lot of interesting insights in this as well. So maybe if we can move on to the next question, I guess, in terms of, more so in terms of commitment, right? I think we've heard a lot from different parties around the need for CCS. There's a lot of excitement about CCS. To be frank, there's also a lot of skepticism about CCS as well. In your view, based on the discussions to date, do you think there is enough conviction in terms of developing CCS in CCUS Indonesia? I think Pak Tutuka, you mentioned that CCUS definitely it's something in which Indonesia will definitely want to pursue. But do you think there is enough of a motivation from both the government and companies to make it work in a short time frame as well?
Yeah. In Indonesia, I think we all know that we just started, yeah. But we have, to my knowledge, to my understanding, we have a tremendous motivation. Currently as the Pak Nanang atau Mas present, there are 15 projects, various steps, and various stages studying G&LCE probably. And maybe the most advanced one is from BP. That's right now maybe in the FIT, preparing the FIT. So it's tremendous motivation. And, from the government really support this. And by, accelerating the presidential regulation, that we hope for several months the government can finish it and can, give this regulation to foster the implementation of CCS, CCUS. And we do hope your projects like Buketi or any other companies will do CCS or CCUS. This regulation, presidential regulation, and the previous regulation is the MEMR regulation, will use the results, the implementation of CCS projects as instruments, from the government to see the realization of the policies. The policy needs feedback, whether it's effective or efficient. So the government really support any kind of CCS project right now. And hopefully each steps of the project will give us inputs and we can improve our regulation and as Pak Baka said, in more details regulation.
And I think maybe just on with you as well, just to be clear, that purpose that we are talking about here, is it more so to solidify the MEMR that was introduced, or is it something different in terms of expanding the scope of CCS and PCS in Indonesia?
The presidential regulation will be kind of umbrella, and also some parts that are not in the MEMR regulation. For instance, like CO2 comes from the industry, can be injected into aquifer. So in the MEMR regulation, there is no clause, articles about that. And the MEMR regulation is just CO2 from industries can be injected only to the reservoir. So in the CCS regulation, that's one thing. So can be injected into aquifer. The second thing is the one is that's much more maybe important for you is the cross-border. So the cross-border, so CCS hub is allowable, and we propose CCS hub is allowable in this presidential regulation. Yeah, and some other things that I think should give us, sufficient regulation to conduct CCS in this country.
Thank you very much. And I think that's extremely exciting, I guess, in terms of really expanding the scope of what we can do in terms of CCS and CCUS, and personally, and I'm sure everyone in the room here can't wait for that purpose to be to come in place. You know, Pak Nanang, I guess you speak to a lot of companies, right? And you know, from your view, you know, what are you hearing? Like, it's a must? We need it, or it's kind of, you know, what is the sense in terms of the motivation here?
Yeah, for our perspective, that there is no option, yeah, because we have to protect our environment, and then while we have to save our investment, yeah. So back to the first statement from Bukati, that which one the first priority, yeah, the first priority, increase production, talking about the economic, yeah, and then protect the environment, yeah. So I think should be balanced, yeah, it should be balanced. So that's why our government very high motivated to implement the CCS and CCUS, yeah, because we get the balancing from our increased production, because in our upstream industry, we cannot stop to explore and then develop, produce oil and gas. Because in the fact, in the future, our demand increase and increase. Yeah, we have to fulfill the demand. But we have to balance, because we know that the hydrocarbon produce the carbon emission. So the implementation of the CCS, CCUS is the best way for the industry, yeah, to balance our business.
Thanks, Pak Nanang. Anything to add, Ibu Kathy or Ibu Bella, on this? Or?
Yeah. So basically, just to give you a context, right? Indonesia, in terms of the emission globally, it's only 2.3 tons per capita, which is lower than the average of the global emission, which is 4.5 tons per capita. So actually, in terms of emission per capita, Indonesia is still safe from global average, right? But then if we're talking that, you know, we want to contribute for the future of our children and also for the investment for Indonesian people, I think we have to do the CCS, right? For example, there are many countries such as Europe, they already have the CBAMs, right? So, you know, when we want to export some products to Europe, they are going to track back our value chain from scope 1 and scope 2 and scope 3, that making sure that our product having a net zero emission on the scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3, right? So I think that's the future. Indonesia has to strengthen the downstream, so we have to downstreaming our natural resources, either natural gas or oil. Then we have to make sure that, you know, we do our best in terms of, you know, reducing the emission for the domestic market, which is doing it with CCS, right? So then, you know, then we can be a good country with exporting a very high premium products that, you know, in terms of to do that, we have to do the CCS, right? So then, you know, we have to put in our mind, CCS now work as a license to invest. And then, you know, we have to start early, because to make sure the technology will, you know, the cost will be reduced, you know, like the LCOE and so on, because we're competing, as you said, right, with the other countries. You know, the other countries are already being aggressively announcing they're going to be the CCS hub. So we don't want to lose that moment where we have the highest storage capacity in the region. So yeah, thank you.
So I'll just add, from an industry standpoint, there is a huge motivation. Many companies in petroleum industry and beyond have our corporate net zero ambition, if you will. And I think we're, from industry standpoint, we're very encouraged. We applaud the government of Indonesia for making tremendous progress and accelerated efforts in including the ministerial regulation that you mentioned earlier this year, and lots and lots of efforts are being progressed. I think collaboration is really key, and I agree with what Tutuka was saying. As policy design needs lifetime feedback, so let's have the project BP Tangguh included to give that to be that test bed as needed, as helpful, to make sure that we can build up the regulatory framework, the policies that are coherent and also implementable. I think all aspects of it, if we can work in a way to connect supply and demand and make the commercial model work and attractive. That's going to deliver all the benefits that we're all aiming to work together to deliver.
I don't know if there's an answer to this, but would you, not for Ibu Ketty, maybe for Pak Tutuka, do you think the purpose on the CCS and CCUS would eventually be elevated into a CCS, CCUS law at some point, or do you think that the importance is enough for it to be a law in itself, similar to oil and gas law, or at some point maybe in the future? Or I don't know. I mean, it's from a policy perspective, it's pretty hard. So
the thing is, right now we again we still have some plans that and we are starting to do it. And you know, often in this industry, the reality is not that so easy. So that we need to really understand that. So, and then in that stage that we realized that this program or these activities, CCS for instance, if we maybe, perhaps in my opinion, will face a lot of challenges in the future. Mm-hmm. In that situation, then we said we need to sit together to solve that. Mm-hmm. Because in my belief, we have to put that CO2 into the earth again, because the CO2 comes from the earth and we have to bring back to the earth. Yep. So that's the philosophy. Yep. There is no space, no storage that sizable enough to put the CO2. So I'm glad right now we have tremendous motivation, but we have to realize once we do, when we implement this CCS, then we will face a lot maybe, challenges. Yeah.
Thank you. And maybe coming to the last question, I guess. I mean, we talked about next steps quite a bit, right? I think, for each of you, I guess the question is really, what do you think are your key next steps for the development of CCS? I guess there's the purpose. Is there anything else that you're thinking about?
For me, just finish the precision cell regulation as fast as possible, and try to give to you and see what you can do with this, and we communicate again, and maybe we need some more derivation of this regulation. Yeah.
Thank you. Pak Nanang, from your perspective, is it also regulations, or very much focused around some of the very technical aspects, as you mentioned earlier, to provide the technical guidelines for CCS? So is that your next step, or what else are you thinking about, I guess, in terms of what needs to be done, or what needs to be accelerated to allow CCS to happen?
Yeah, SKK Migas rule, managing the PSC operator to manage the upstream oil and gas industry, from the exploration, development, producing, and commercial. So our rule should be consistent. Should be consistent to fulfill especially our national demand. For the future. And then, meanwhile, we have to consider our environment as well by implementing the CCS end users. So the balance between our activities in upstream and then implementing the CCS and CCS is, I think, is the best way to run the business for the future.
Anything else? Yeah.
Yeah, if I may add. So as a country, we have to work together, right? So that's one thing. And then second thing, from the ministerial levels, we have to work fast and then efficiently and comprehensively to work towards the presidential regulation that we are working our best on this one. And then I think in terms of the other things that we have to work together is, we have to raise public awareness. We have to do many capacity building, right, internally in terms of in our government, working together with the business or industries that are already expert in this manner, especially the upstream oil and gas, right? And then other than that, I think we just have to work together as stakeholders, right? Because it's like it needs a village to develop a CCS. It's like it needs a village to raise a kid.
Yep.
It needs a village to develop and implement CCS, right? So I think for that we are already aware, and then we have to work together as the stakeholders. Yeah.
Thank you. Anything to add from your end in terms of last thoughts before we open up for Q&A? Kathy?
Yeah. Thank you. I think from industry standpoint, I would say two aspects. First is, as what Nanang has showed on the map, there are multiple projects on CCS, CCUS that's been progressing. So each of our companies should continue to do that and address some of these technical, commercial issues. And second, I think industry participants should work together to support the government in developing this regulatory framework and policies and procedures that the government is already working very hard on, and also linking the bigger hub ideas and opportunities, increase our leadership in the region.
And then, hopefully we can all work together to put Indonesia on the map as a key CCS hub and storage location for the world, right? So, so we're moving into Q&A. So in case you haven't submitted any questions and want to, there is the QR code on the left side and the right side of the screens. Please submit your questions, and we do have one now, so I'll probably read that out. This is a question for Pak Tutuka. Is there any showstopper for enabling CO2 import into Indonesia for CCS? We have learned that Malaysia and even East Timor proactively offer their country as a storage location for carbon emissions from other countries. So any thoughts from your end?
Yeah, I think CCS CCS cross-border will be conducted firstly by government to government. So bilateral agreement first, because between countries, among a nation, among the countries and nation, I think they have different set of regulations. So that's the first thing that we need to do, bilateral. And then if there's no problem, then I think I guess it's just technical problems. So that transportation and so on. So that's the thing. So I don't think will be a big handicap. So, to my knowledge.
And any other thoughts in terms of? I think maybe I can add as well. I guess the question also really becomes, what comes first, right? Especially from cross-border. Is it a project first, or is it because I think as we think through the regulations required and kind of trying to solve actual issues, maybe a project is a good one, a proposed project, right? As a starting point for that discussion between the governments to say, if we have the motivation to make it happen, what do we need to do? What are the issues we need to solve? And that would be the test bed for the first CO2 cross-border agreement, and then we can kind of potentially go from there. And, that's extremely exciting as well. There's another question. I think this one for Dr. Belladonna. Is it really safe to store CO2 underground? I think we do hear that a lot. If there's leaking to the surface, what's the worst case scenario?
Yeah, thank you for the question from the audience. I think this is a very common and favorite question from people, right? And then, is it really safe to store CO2 underground? I think the answer to that politically and scientifically, I think it's yes, because there have been many research in terms of CO2 storage since, I think, early 1990s. It's already been done and implemented in Norway since 1984, in US 1996, in Canada in 2000. So if we're doing it right, I think it should be safe, because when I was leading the CCS and CCUS projects in Pertamina, there were a lot of comprehensive subsurface studies that we have to do, such as geomechanics, geochemistry, cap rock strength, fault reactivation, natural fracture reactivation, and so on. So there are many best industry standards, best practice that we can follow that's already been implemented by the other countries and by the other leading companies, right? There is another good question. If leaking to the surface, what is the worst case scenario? So I think we have to understand together that we're injecting CO2 underground in a very deep depth. So it's between around 2 kilometers away. So it would be not easy to leak to the surface, right? Just to give you an example, subsurface is not like a balloon, it's a rock, right? So it's a rock that has porosities, permeabilities, like very, very small holes that is not very easily for the CO2 to have a conductive flow path or easy to move, right? As I mentioned in my PhD thesis that, this permeability and porosity is a function of pressure and temperature that will change as a function of time, right? So I think the thing that we have to put attention into is the leaking on the subsurface, which is basically from the injection zone that we're injecting, it can go through to another zones and then probably can reactivate the fault and so on. But rest assured, there are best industry standards. Just to give you an example, from the injection well to the nearby fault, it has to be around 7 kilometers, the safe distance to not to reactivate the fault, right? And then there are many other best industry standards scientifically to solve this concern.
Okay, thank you. Pak Tutuka, do you have something else to add?
Yeah, and actually there are several internationally recognized standards in storing the CO2 in the ground, such as from the Norway. So it should be safe, technically, according to geological knowledge, because the above of the targets, the zone targets, there is a containment zones. Above the containment zone should be has to have the confinement zone. So there is some rocks that prevent CO2 from leakage to the surface. That's the regulation. That regulation is the MEMR regulation number 223. It's adopted that standard. So, and when we are making the models of reservoir model of CCS, we have to run maybe 100 years or 1,000 years to make it sure that the CO2 plumb is not, leakage from that zone. So it's rigid, handle and make sure that will not leak to the surface. If there is happen, then there is a monitoring on the surface, and we can plant Indonesia. There is a trumpesi. I don't know in English. We can plant maybe 1,000 of the trees.
Trees. Okay.
To absorb the CO2. So I think you shouldn't be worried about that.
Yep.
So there's some standards.
So just to confirm, if it's injected into a saline aquifer, our drinking water is safe, right? just to confirm, if it's injected into a saline aquifer, our aqua is safe. We can drink the water, right?
Far away. This is down there, maybe 1 or 2 kilometers down there. So it's very far from this bottle.
Okay, so yeah, no, it's definitely safe as far as I understand, and confirmed by Pak Tutuka. Okay, I think, I'm not sure if there's any more questions. One last one. I think everyone's really active after lunch. I guess to all panelists, probably the last question as well. What are the key policy elements needed for CCS development of Indonesian CCS hub, I guess, in this case? Anything else? Yeah, anything to add?
Yeah, it's the $1 million question, I guess, Josh, right? I think since we are working on this presidential regulation for the CCS hub, I think there are two at least the main concern ones, right? So the first one is the financial or the commercial schemes, right? How to make it profit center in terms of cost center. So this is the first one that we really needed to have the most optimum localized regulation in terms of financial or business scheme or commercial scheme, right? The second one that we cannot really forget is the liabilities, right? So, you know, when we're talking about capturing CO2, transporting it, and storing it in Indonesia, there are many stakeholders that has the liabilities, either the capturer, the transporter, the injector, and then the one that already has the storage capacity, and then later on the government of Indonesia, right? So these liabilities is a big topic that we have to try to address together. Is it going to be a shared liabilities? Is it going to be, a percentage or royalties, or it's still an exploration or a very hot discussion in terms of liabilities itself, because it's something that we have to think together and then really sit and then find what is the best solution for Indonesia. Yeah.
And I think from my perspective as well, there's a lot of precedents, a lot of regulations out there in different countries. We're not saying that Indonesia should just copy and paste, but I think as a reference point, something to look at. But I think at least in the paper as well, we do highlight kind of the key thing. And I think that's been addressed at the purpose. I think the fundamental thing is that the legalization of CCS as an activity needs to be there. I think that's above all the most fundamental requirement. And also, I think in the paper we did mention that there's also a requirement to be clear in terms of who is the coordinating regulator or the coordinating body for CCS activities in Indonesia, right? Because it is cutting across different industries as well. I think we are actually running out of time. So we do have a new question coming in, but I think the next question is about business models. And of course, in the next session, we will be talking about business models. So thanks very much for being here today. Thanks for sharing your candid thoughts. Hopefully it was enjoyable for all the participants of this session. I definitely learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone else did as well. So thank you very much, and can we please have a big round of applause for the panelists today? Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it was a very insightful session, and thank you, Mr. Joshua Ngu, for leading that. And would like to also give our appreciation as we give them mementos for speakers and for the moderator or presenter himself. And for that, I would like to invite Mr. Gary Selby. All right. Now, as a form of our appreciation, here are the mementos to the presenter and speakers. We heard that Indonesia has a very significant competitive advantage for the CCS and CCUS development, and of course will deliver Indonesia some advantage and values with some obstacles and challenge that remains on how to make sure economic growth and environment sustainability and responsibility are going to be well balanced. Thank you very much, Mr. Gary, and maybe would like to have just one group picture before going back to your seats. Okay, everyone ready with their poses and smiles, please? Yep. Okay, 3, 2, 1, and yes, another one. 3, 2, 1. All right, ladies and gentlemen, please finally give a big round of applause for the speakers and presenter for this session. You may all return to your seats, and after this, ladies and gentlemen, we will still have the last session of the day, which is focus discussion 2. But before that, we invite you to have a refreshment, tea and coffee on the side of this plenary hall or Nusantara ballroom, just on the corner over there. You may just have your tea and coffee and maybe do some more chatting with friends and colleagues. And we will start our next session at 3 p.m. So we expect everybody to be here just before 3 p.m. to start with the next session. Thank you very much.